Hello YouTube, PsychoFox here. You're looking at an Amstrad PCW 8256, something you've no doubt seen many times on this channel, but I'm going to revisit something that I've done 2 times before unsuccessfully, and that is to try and miniaturize this computer into a more portable version of itself. It's something I really wanted to do for a long time, and I've just, due to technical limitations, the limitations of my knowledge, it's just never worked. I've had unsuccessful attempts that you can probably still find on YouTube. So this is the system. We've got a keyboard plugged in a connection on the side, 14-inch green screen monitor, 3-inch disk drive. We've got a printer there, which we will not be using for this. There'll be no, due to power limitations, we won't be using the 24 volts for the printer, so I'm going to try and get all this into here, well, apart from the monitor obviously. This is something I wanted to for a long time, but I can never work out how to make it fit. But now I've found out a way of doing it. So this is an old, as you obviously can tell, it's an old CPC 6128 case, a bit bad shape, but I've got all the screws for it. It's all structurally sound. So obviously it's the same size disk drive, so keyboard, yeah, we'll go in there. So it should work, right? So let's just have a look inside the Amstrad just to see what sort of parts we'll be putting inside that CPC case. Okay, so I've got the rear of the case off, just to show you the layout of things. Don't worry, this isn't the one I'm going to be taking apart to put inside the case, because this is my minty mint condition one. As you can see, everything's in fantastic condition. So I'll just show you what's what in here. So we've got the 3-inch disk drive in the cage here. There's the logic board and the enormous power board at the bottom. So it was the power board that was sort of the thorn in my side when I was trying to miniaturize this computer before. I retained the power board because I could not see any way else of doing it, because at the time I was wanting to keep the original disk drive, which runs off 12 volts. The board runs off 5 volts and that runs off 12 volts, and I didn't really understand switching power supplies, and I thought I could make it work using the original power board, but that also meant that it wouldn't fit inside a small case like the 6128 case. So in the end I ended up putting it in a Perspex case, and because I wasn't using it in the way it was designed for, something shorted out and it ruined the board anyway. So I'm going to be doing things in a different way this time. We're going to be forgetting that power board. We don't need it, because we don't need the 24 volts for the printer. We won't be needing the 12 volts for the drive. We'll be using a GoTech drive, which runs off 5 volts, same as the board. So the only power in we're going to need coming through the connector here is 5 volts and ground. So I'll be taking a spare board I have, putting it in there. It will fit. The keyboard, that dimension fits perfectly. It's just slightly too long, so we might need to just trim about 1 centimetre off around there. I don't feel too bad about messing up this case, because as you can see, it's not in great shape anyway. The GoTech will slot in there, and we've got all the ports on the back that we need. So that's what I'll be doing. So let's go ahead and start work, and hopefully this will turn out a bit better than the last one. I'll just mention that I've the last one I was running it through it was called a Rombo digitizer, plugged on the back on this edge connector here, and outputs of a TV. I've purchased from a user on CPC Wiki forum a little device which goes on there on the video out, much smaller, so that'll output just via a composite lead to a TV. So there's no monitor involved in this. It'll just be this little thing hooked up to a TV, just like a CPC, but it'll be a PCW masquerading as a CPC. Right, so that's the layout of the land inside the case. That's what I've got to try and cram into this thing. So, let's get started. Okay, so here's the logic board we'll be lending to this little project. I've got the power disconnected here. This gives the board the 5 volts, the 12 volts, the 24 volts. Obviously not all these will be needed, so we disconnect that. We disconnect the keyboard, because I've got another keyboard connector I'll be using, and the video out. So with that, the little logic board will just slide out, and this is a nice one because it's got some extra RAM. We've got a 512k RAM on this, so it's a nice small board which will actually fit inside the CPC case. So that's the first little piece of the puzzle we need. So right, let's see if there's any nice logical way to orientate that inside the new CPC case. Right, I've got the CPC case open here, and obviously it does fit. It's not going to line up properly with the ports on the back. That's the printer power in. There's the printer connector there. That's the edge connector. That's obviously blocked at the moment by these little bits of plastic here. And we need to leave enough room on this side for the circuit board, for the back of the keyboard. Obviously that's where the GoTech is going to sit there. These are the drive connection wires and the drive power connectors there, which will need to be modified to work with the GoTech. So one thing I thought about is perhaps that power in jack, we could cut the trace and rewire it. So instead of giving 24 volts for the printer, we cut the trace and put the 5 volts to the power in here, one of these. I know which one it is, I've just not got it at hand at the moment. So that's one idea, because obviously that'll be connected to ground as it is. So yeah, that could be repurposed to be a 5 volt power in. It's just got a standard little jack there. That's not needed. It doesn't really matter if that gets blocked off, because we won't be using any peripherals on this anyway, because if one uses peripherals I can just use it on another Amstrad PCW. I've got about 4 of them. So that's not the purpose of this one. It's to try and strip it down and keep it as simple as possible. So it's good that it fits. So let's see if we can sort of get the keyboard and see if we can get any sort of resemblance of what this thing could actually look like when it's finished. Okay, so I'll just show you a little few things I've got before I start looking at the keyboard. This is the video out board. So it's a tiny little board, and that'll just slot onto that blue connector there, and you get the power from the spare B drive cable, which we won't be using, and connect to ground, and then got a composite wire I've wired in, which will output to a TV in black and white, so the green screen is lost, but you're outputting in monochrome, just like a BBC Micro in the basic screen. So that's what I'll be using for video out. I've got a GoTech here. This is currently wired up for a PCW, so the orientation is a bit wrong. The OLED screen's orientated wrong, but it gives you a sort of a rough idea. So it'll be in a different plastic chassis with screw mounting holes that actually match, but we've got the connector cables there, the adapter there for the Amstrad ribbon cable, which will be that one, but that's not going to reach, so that's another little bridge to traverse, because that really needs to connect to that, so I'm going to have to create a bit of a longer cable, because that one there would reach, but that's for the B drive, and just the quirk of the Amstrad PCW, you're not able to boot from B drive. So if I connected that to the GoTech, it just would sit there doing nothing. So here's the keyboard. I've got keyboard connectors. This whole wire and the keyboard connector will be housed inside the case. That, if you remember, will connect there. So I've got this already unscrewed. This is from quite fittingly a 512K model. So I've took this apart the other day and cleaned it all. It wasn't in too bad a shape. So yeah, the only hurdle you've got this little board which stands off from the keyboard by a few centimetres. Hopefully when that's positioned in, that'll somehow sit between the Gotek and the logic board. So if we shift the logic board over as far as we can, that'll sit somewhere like that. Obviously the back of the keyboard might need some might need a bit of shielding on it or something, but that's what we're looking at the moment. So we've got all the components here at the moment. The only trouble is, that's what it'll, rough approximation of what it would look like. Yeah, you're missing a row of keys there, so you're going to have to very carefully Dremel out a little bit there. But on the whole, I think this should work. It's got a lot more potential than my other consoleized Amstrad PCW projects, just because of the power requirements. I mean, there's no way I was going to get that power board in here, and it's just completely not needed. I really should have thought things through a bit better, but at the time I was unaware of the existence of a Gotek. So I was still hanging on to that 12 volt for the disk drive, but that's not needed anymore. So all this is just going to run off 5 volts. So hopefully we can get it all running in for that little connector there. So let's get this keyboard fitted. Let's get chopping away this old case. Okay, so before I crack on with the keyboard, I'll just reiterate and sort of clarify what I was talking about with the power connector. So this is the power lead that comes from the main power board. We won't be using this obviously, but I'll let you know what the wires are. We've got the yellow there, that's the 24 volt, orange is 12 volt, red is 5 volt, and black and brown are both ground. And they correspond with these little pads. The first pad is linked to both black and brown, that's ground. Second pad is linked to the red wire, which is 5 volts. Third pad is linked to the orange, which is 12, and the far pad is linked to the yellow, which is 24 volts. So what I think I'll be doing is soldering to these pads and just sort of taping up this connector, these bare metal standoffs there, because they're not going to be needed, and I don't really want to keep this plastic thing attached to it because it just takes up extra sort of headroom. So yeah, that's the power side of things. So all we'd be using is the 5 volts, so we'd just be using the first and second pads, the ground and the 5 volts. The other ones will be unused, they'll be not required. So right, yeah, so that's the power side of things. Let's get everything put in the case. Right, so I've not got everything inside, but as you can see, I've taken a bit of plastic off the case with a Dremel. I took 1.9 centimeters down this edge. I've not completely finished the edge yet, it's pretty smooth, but I could do with a little bit more fine sanding. And we've got the keyboard from an Amstrad PCW inside the CPC 6128 case. And I think that looks alright actually. It looks quite in keeping, because it's basically the same keyboard just with a couple of extra rows on it. So I'm yet to work out how I'm going to sort of do cable management inside the case. Obviously that cannot sit there, that's where the Gotek disk drive replacement will go, and hopefully that'll just about leave room, so that sort of sits flush with the edge of the Gotek there. If not, I'm sure we can jiggle things around a bit. Yeah, so I've had to cut off inside the case. See, that's where that edge of that I did the dremeling on, that edge there. So I've had to cut off these little standoffs, these 6 standoffs, because they were just in the way and making the keyboard sit too low in the case. So that's where the stage I'm at the moment. So let's get a few things wired in. We can get the main board in. We'll do a little modification to that for the power supply. We can get the GoTech in. We can get the video adapter in. And let's see if this thing will actually close up once all that's in place. So here's the 24 volt out for the printer, because the power comes out of here for the printer. So what I've done there, I've just cut that trace, and I've got from the positive tip there, I've run a wire to the 5 volt rail there. So when we put power in, I've got a 5 volt 3 amp power supply, exactly the same one I used to power my CPC 6128. We've got one probe on the ground, one probe on the 5 volts. I'll just move into the shot so you can see it. So we've got one probe on the ground, one probe on the 5 volts, and we've got 5.16 volts. There you go. Right, so that's the power supply sorted. That's the 5 volts to the board. That's all that will be required for this board, because it's going to be running a GoTech, not a 12 volt, requiring disk drive. So I would like to get it mounted in this case. I just took the bezel off there. Yeah, someone's used some sort of plastic bonding glue at some point. It's really eating away into it, but it's no bother because I'm going to be replacing this bezel anyway with something custom PCW related. I would like to keep that edge connector actually, and I said I wouldn't because I want to put a joystick interface on it, but it's not going to line up, so I think that little bit there is going to have to be drilled off, unfortunately, because I want to keep it as far across this side of the case as possible. So there's going to be the power jack. That's the superfluous printer port. I could take that off, I suppose. They're going to have to come out to access that. Not sure how close to the edge I'm going to have to mount this. I might need to mount it a bit closer like that. Keyboard and keyboard controller is going to be there. GoTech's going to be there. So now we've got that, we can plug the a GoTech into it and the power board adapter and actually see if it's outputting to the TV. So before we do any more mounting in the case, let's just do that. So I had a little bit of a failed attempt with this, which I've not documented because I spent a bit of time trying to figure out what was wrong. And what it turns out is I was just using the original ground for this. I cut the 24 volt outline, but I was just using the original ground because it had continuity to one of these pins anyway, so I thought, oh, that'll be fine. But it turns out it didn't have continuity to the floppy power cable which is powering the GoTech, so that ground wasn't linked to the ground that I'd left in from this jack. So what I've done is I've just run another wire to the ground pins. We've got the 5 volts in and the ground connected now, and all continuity is good. So it's a bit of a dirty setup really. You've got the GoTech here. The cable's too short at the moment, so it won't stretch over there. We've got the video outboard, and that's taking power from the B drive floppy cable, as you can see there. Just think to the orange 5 volts. That plugs in. That's the power board there. Quite a nice simple little board. That's going to the composite on the TV. I've got the keyboard connected there, which is just rigged up like this. So I've just got the keyboard in the external housing at the moment. So, right. The GoTech will boot up into CPM as soon as the power is switched. So let's look at the TV. There we are, it's displaying in monochrome, as it should. And there we've got CPM. So, now if we just go to the GoTech, and let's select a program. Let's select one of my favourite games, Distractions. And for this you've got to do Shift Extra and Exit. I'll have to press the right combination of buttons. And this game, On the Run, which is part of this Distractions compilation, was always a favourite of mine when I was a kid. You've probably seen it before, but in green screen. So that looked great on this LCD TV. This is actually joystick compatible, this game, which is one of the reasons why I wanted a way to keep the edge connector free for the joystick interface. So yeah, this is actually working. I've got the two main hurdles which I always had before. We're trying to fit one of these in a case, which was the power supply and the video out. So now I've got absolutely everything working. I've just got to get it all crammed in that case. So yeah, it's a very underrated system for games, this. I mean, obviously it was a word processor. PCW is personal computer word processor. But I mean, it's quite a powerful system. This one's got 512k RAM, as opposed to the old 128, which the CPC that used to inhabit this case had. So yeah, it's got a lot of good games for it. A lot of text adventures, obviously, but a lot of good arcade style games, flight sims, racing games. Good stuff. So right, that's a lot of major hurdles done now with this. So now let's get everything mounted inside the case and looking a bit neater. Now we proved it can work. Very pleased with this. Very pleased with this. It's a mess at the moment, but it's coming together. A lot of space savings just mean taking place in the case, because I put the two halves together and found out that this keyboard controller board has been impinging on where the video out board goes. So what I've had to do is connect the video out board with some DuPont connectors, because they're going to sit a lot flatter. And to save space, I've taken out the whole keyboard assembly and just mapped up the pins on the back of the controller board there with the keyboard out pins on the motherboard, and just connected them with DuPont connectors as well. So that's going to be a lot less things inside the case, because that was quite bulky and that was getting in the way, and we've really not got much room. These ribbon cables take up a fair bit of room as well, because they're ideally you'd like them sort of coming from there, but obviously it's not been designed to mount in this case, so it is what it is. We've got them at the front and we'll have to try and do it as best we can. I did think of routing them under the board, but there's not much room and I didn't want to get them squashed, and the little stalks of the chips poke through the ribbon there. So that's where we are at the moment. So with these little connectors all in place, I've checked it all for continuity, but I think the best thing to do is get it all plugged in against the TV and see if we've still got video out capability and keyboard capability. So let's get that all set up once more. Well, we've still got video out, and that's a good sign. Obviously I will be routing the wires through a little jack in the back of the case, composite out jack, but for now they're just sort of hanging up directly off that video board. So let's see if we've got keyboard. And we have. There's the contents of the virtual disk that's in it. Excellent. So there, that's really going to save a lot of room inside this case. So all we really need to do now is get that composite jack put in, get the GoTech properly mounted, and we're done. It's already sitting a lot flatter. I need to get some custom decal put on it. So, good stuff. Right, let's get on with it. So I've been doing a bit more tinkering, and I've got a single pole, single throw on-off switch here, which can be quite useful to reset the PCW. I've also got a 1K potentiometer here hooked up to the buzzer, because the buzzer is pretty loud, and some games use it for, in inverted commas, music, and you could really do with turning that down sometimes. So that's a feature. Otherwise, everything's pretty much the same. I'm going to be hooking in a little LED here with a resistor to a couple of points on the bottom of the keyboard, connected there to ground and 5 volts. Other than that, I've got my CPC GoTech bracket on order. I've got the PCW GoTech there, and everything's working fine. So what I'll do now, I'll just turn it on, give you a little demonstration. Okay, so if we flick the on switch, so everything's working fine. So I'll just load up the game Batman now, because that's got some music on the start, just to demonstrate the potentiometer working. So bear with me a second. So yeah, just twisting the potentiometer there. Cut the noise down to 0, and now you can put it back up to full. So that's working well, because some of this music on these games is a bit harsh. So it's nice just to have the facility to turn it down a bit. And it's going to poke out there through these little side holes on the 6128 case nicely. That's going to, the on-off switch is going to line up in the joystick hole, and the volume potentiometer is going to be in this old hole that was the stereo out, little 3.5mm jack, so that's going to fit in there nicely. So all I've got to do now is a bit of tidying up. So you can see Batman's loaded there, he's tapping his foot impatiently. So it's a really nice picture on this screen out of this composite. So yeah, just got to get the CPC GoTech bracket. I've got it in the PCW bracket at the moment. A bit of cable management, and then it's ready. Get it all back together. Oh, I need to do that LED as well, just on there. So the next shot you see will be the complete finished article. Right, let's get to it. Right, so while I'm waiting for those last few parts, the resistor to come on the GoTech mount, I thought I'd go about creating a custom bezel for the front, because if you remember, the old CPC one was all bent and scratched up. So what I've ended up doing is taking a photograph of the front of the Amstrad PCW, the bezel, just chopping the top off really, because it's not going to be the right ratio otherwise, and I've just recreated it here. So this is what I'm going to print out and laminate and stick on above the GoTech drive. So just recreating this, I've just realised that they must have just used the first font that came to hand, because all this is just Arial, or Arial, however you want to say it, which is a bit disappointing really. I thought it'd be a bit more difficult than that. But as you may notice, that I'm using an ancient program called Picture It on Windows XP here to do this, because it's just what I'm used to, and I don't get on with Photoshop. So yeah, this is a great program. It works really well on old computers. So what I'll do is I'll print this off, I'll get it sized up, print it off, and get it laminated, and we'll stick it in that little recess. So it'll be a nice little bespoke sort of little finishing touch really. And I'm also going to hopefully do something else with the long bezel above the keyboard, which we'll have a look at in a minute. So yeah, I just thought I'd show you guys that before I go and print it off. Before we quickly move on, as I mentioned, I've got a different bezel on here. So what I ended up doing was, this is a thin piece of aluminium on here. So what you want to do is get a hairdryer on the hottest setting, just gently go over and over and over it, and then start prying up the one end. If you do this cold, it'll just bend and it'll never go flat. So you do it to melt the adhesive. Once it's off, the adhesive's still pliable, just quickly put it on and flatten it down, and the adhesive cools and sticks perfectly. So we've got a nice Amstrad 512K word processor bezel there. I know the actual colours don't really have any sort of meaning now, because obviously this is monochrome, but I think I'll just leave that as a nod back to the old CPC. So yeah, I'm really pleased how that went. I'll keep that just in case I ever need to put it back. Yeah, and so if I ever need to take this off, the original bezel's under there, just do the same, heat it, and it'll come off fine without harming the one underneath. So right, we'll get that new laminated one on, and then we're just waiting for a few bits and bobs, and then we're done. So really pleased how this is working at the moment. It's coming together really nicely. So let's get this cosmetically finished. Right, so one of my final jobs now, the resistors here. I've got the LED, just sort of loosely wired here as a proof of concept. Got 120 ohm resistor on the positive leg. I've actually gone for the solder points behind the keyboard connector, as opposed to the other side on the keyboard microcontroller, because the voltages are just a bit more reliable here. So switching on, a bit hard to see, but it is coming on. So we've got our LED, and that's a 5mm by 2mm as used in the CPC 6128. So I'll get that all trimmed down and soldered up a bit nicer, and we'll get that installed in the case. Right, that's everything done. So before I close up the case, which should be quite fun, getting all these cables to tangle away neatly, I'll just take you on a quick tour and show you what I've done. So obviously we've got the back of the keyboard there, and we've got the base here. So let's start up in this corner. So if you remember, I repurposed the 24 volt out printer jack from the Amstrad PCW board. It's now a 5 volt in, and this runs the whole thing. It runs the motherboard, the GoTech, the video out board, powers the keyboard. So that's the only thing you need. You've got a power jack there. I've connected a single pole, single throw on off switch, toggle switch there, just so you can sort of turn it on and off when you want, sort of acts like a reset. I've got a potentiometer there on the buzzer, just to make things a bit more bearable at times. I've just masked off those pins there, because they'll still be carrying out 5 volts, so mask that off. So not done much else. I've removed the B drive cable, floppy connector, because that's not required and it was taking up room. So if we follow this ribbon cable, I've had to extend it, done a bit of work patching onto another one, because it was just too short to reach the GoTech. So I'm going to have to make sure that's sitting nice and flat. Got the power cord here, going to the PCW connector with the wires swapped around, because we just need the 5 volts and the wiring slightly different. There's the GoTech. I've got a reset button plugged in there, SD card, little OLED screen there. Up here we've got the video outboard tucked away. I might have to tuck that away a bit neater. That's going to a composite jack there. That's getting power from the 5 volts on the B drive connector. This is the video out of the board. I've just sort of angled these. They were standing upright and I've just angled them down just so they don't interfere with the board on the back of the keyboard. And one of the pins snapped off, so that's wired in underneath on that green wire there. And the same with the keyboard connectors, just sort of put them down at a 45-degree angle, just to make things sit a bit flatter, because that's the main problem. You've got this nice area of space here, but that's where the keyboard circuit board sits across, and I've cut the standoffs a bit, so I've lowered that by about 7mm, but it's still protruding in quite a lot. And one of the main problems as well, you wouldn't think with this ribbon cable, obviously it's going to sit somewhere around there, and it just doesn't want to close over it. So one of the other problems is we're gonna, because all the screw points are different, we're gonna lose a lot of our screws. That one we can keep, which will screw in there. That one obviously it's not going to correspond to anything, so I think we're going to have that one. I think that one's still okay because that screws into that one, and one of the side ones that goes through into the Gotek mount, one of these little side hole ones here, will actually still work. But aside from that, yeah, none of the ones on the back are actually going to be screwing in, so I might have to, once I get it all together, dab a little bit of super glue just in a couple of little spots like here and here, just to get the case to sit nicely and clamp it together. But yeah, that's where we're at the moment. So what I'm going to do next is try and persuade this little rat's nest of cables to sit snugly inside the case, and then we'll have a look at the final piece in action. Okay, so here we are. The bezel needs sticking down in those corners. It's lifted up a little bit. There's the custom made bezel there. I've got it all sat together. It's not quite, the case isn't quite screwed and glued together yet, but look, it's working fine. There we've got on the run. So we've got the potentiometers working fine. If we turn it off and then back on again, we'll boot to CPM, do dir for directory. That shows you what's in CPM. So yeah, we can load games from here. So let's just find a game we might want to play. Let's just say Fairlight. I know Fairlight is F and return. So it comes out really nice on this display through composite. And there we've got Fairlight loading up. Looks really nice in monochrome actually. A lot easier on the eye than on a green CRT. So I've got everything you need on this USB stick. I've got local scripts, you can do word processing, save it to virtual disks, but the main draw obviously for me is playing games. And yeah, I think it looks quite neat. Looks even better when it's all completely flashed together. But very, very pleased with this. This is something I've wanted to build for a long, long time and never quite had the skills to get it done. Not to how I wanted it. But yeah, this is nice. So we've got Fairlight, classic isometric game there. I'm not sure you control this one. Yeah, the keyboard works really nice. So yeah, I've just got to find a way of sticking it together without crushing everything inside. And it's not bad at the moment. It's very nearly flashed. The front sits down alright, but yeah, I don't want anything shorting or getting pulled out of place, and I've just got to fix that bezel. But it's not too bad around the back either. Not too bad. Get the printer port there, because if I ever want to use the printer, I can just connect it to that and power it separately with a 24 volt input. So I've not really damaged anything of this board inside. I could take it out if I wanted and reuse it, put it back in an Amstrad, and this case was a bit beaten up anyway, so I don't feel too bad about hacking little bits off it. And at the end of the day, I've made something quite unique. So yeah, hope you've enjoyed this little, well, little, I say it's probably going to be quite a long video, but there's been a lot of things to do. So there we go. Amstrad PCW on a TV in a CPC 6128 case, just for the fun of it. So thanks for watching, guys, and just a little add on the end, this is probably going to be my last ever YouTube video, because I just wanted to sign off with a project that I've always wanted to do, and I've not really got it in my heart to make videos lately, so I'll keep watching them, keep commenting, but this will probably be the last you'll see from me upload wise, so hope you're doing a nice way to sign off. Thanks for watching, guys. See ya.